recently, my parents got possession of a house that they've taken, which is a 2.5 BHK in Pune. And I'm so excited about this house. I am more excited about this 2.5 BHK house than I am about my own house. And I was there yesterday. I was, in Ambi Valley, and I was coming back, and I took my children to see their house for the first time. It's unfurnished. It's just blank. But it's a house my parents have bought, and it's only the second house which they bought in their life. And the minute it was bought, like parents, they turned to me and said, "This is for our grandson." And your name can also be in it because, they want to make sure. So I was like, absolutely. But, there's something about this 2.5 BHK that keeps me so excited. I keep thinking about it. I think about how I'm going to furnish it. I think about what am I going to do with it. And I find that there is some strange thing going on in my head between this massive house that I live in and this 2.5 BHK that I sort of own or part own. And then I was thinking about it, and I realized that it actually reminds me of our first house. Because the house that we had in Lucknow, my grandfather was this big lawyer, huge lawyer, and he had properties all over UP. But he was one of those good Muslim men who had many people and many children. So every property was bequeathed to someone or the other. And my father being amongst the, there were elder sisters, etc. and things, and then he came towards the bottom. He ended up with this one property in Lucknow. And it was in the middle of a market. And in this middle of this market, it didn't even have a door. Okay, it had a shutter. Because I think it was meant to be a shop, and he got it because of winning some litigation, and my parents were living there. But this was their house, the house that they owned. And once they owned this house, there was this thing of saying, how do we build this house? And I have seen my parents go through the whole time of bringing the tuna, bringing the Neil, mixing it together, going out and buying that brush, and actually testing the brush out first on the road, कि अच्छा है कि नहीं है, then bringing it back, then putting it up, going and buying enamel, liquefying it as much as possible so it could last across all the doors and windows, and giving us as children an opportunity also to sort of, dab the last bit. What kone wala part the children could do so that it felt that they really owned it. And, this house, even if it's just a couple of 2 rooms at that point in time, I remember, we didn't even have a first floor, it was just 2 rooms. And it was their pride of place. If we left a mark on the wall, God help us. There was nothing. But there was one wall which my mother would happily mark. And this was the one in which she used to mark our height. Right? And for parents at that point in time, even your measuring tape is a do-it-yourself. Right? So they built this little piece. And then there was the drawing room. And our drawing room was a compromise between a garage and a drawing room because you couldn't park on the road because most people's vehicles parked on the road chori ho jati thi. So my father was saying, he had one scooter, and that scooter would be parked, and we had cycles which would be parked, and there was a little curtain that acted as a weird partition, and then there were these 2-3 sofas and one black and white TV. Now the black and white TV made us extra special. Every Wednesday evening and Saturday evening, every person in the mohalla used to be nice to us. Because we were the only TV in the entire mohalla. तो Wednesday को आपके कपड़े स्त्री ज़्यादा होते थे, आपको 2 टमाटर एक्स्ट्रा मिल जाते थे. But I used to do all these things in the house and whatever. And come 7 o'clock, I would be standing at the door. I was the sentry who would allow people inside. And boss, there was no more pluralistic India that I have ever seen. We had everyone from the person who used to sweep the streets to the ironing person to the Panditji who lived in the house opposite, who only wanted to see dharmic pictures, Everyone. Really, I sometimes feel that the melting pot of India that comes together in these places is completely different. It's completely different. And people would sit there for a long time. And depending on how nice they were, they would get balcony seats or front row seats, staring right at the TV and things. And the other thing was that this was a time when you didn't have music systems, right? You didn't have big music systems, you didn't have iPods, you didn't have Walkmans, you didn't have Netflix, you didn't have different channels or whatever to entertain you. My father had a Philips 2-in-1. And that Philips 2-in-1 used to be placed next to the TV to record the songs from Chitrahar. And God help you if you spoke in the middle of Chitrahar. And I once remember, these are those old televisions that had an antenna that was connected to a wire. Yeah? And I once remember that there was Rakesh Bhaiya used to live opposite our house, and there was that song coming, Angrezi mein kehte hain ki I love you, Gujarati maa bole tame prem karu chu, and it went on and whatever. And Rakesh Bhaiya laughed loudly. And 30 pairs of eyes turned and looked at Rakesh Bhaiya because the recording had been spoiled. But once the recording was spoiled, the punishment for the person used to be to stand and hold the antenna wire. Because without holding the antenna wire, the images used to be really blurred. Okay, so even our music was a little do-it-yourself. The last thing which was really do-it-yourself in our home was my father was an electrical engineer. Now, he was an electrical engineer who had done a diploma and used to teach electrical engineering. So imagine a theorist who hasn't practiced too much. But God help you if something went wrong in your house, because he's an electrical engineer. He has to solve it himself. So slowly our house became a booby trap. There was a wire coming from the Tullu pump that went to the mains. And from the mains there were 2 more wires that went to a hanger from which there was a bulb that was hanging. And there was an extension cord that was attached to 2 more wires, which made it an extension of an extension cord, because it could go across 2 rooms. It was crazy. If my father was placed at the LOC, no insurgent would ever get through. They would all be electrocuted to death. All of us have experienced one electric shock in our life. Definitely. We realized, and only practice teaches you this, that AC does not mean alternate current. DC does not mean direct current. It means aaj chipak, dur chitak. This was such a Lucknow memory, I remember, or whatever, etc. But this was life, And I realized that my dad had this box, and this box was like a treasure. Aladdin ka chirag kya hoga, wo jo box tha. That box had every kind of wire, every kind of nut, bolt, screwdriver, something that would possibly attach to something. That was its job. And it was there because you still hadn't found the other thing. But it was there. It was lying in part of this box. And each of these things kept making me think that for that generation of really middle-class parents, do-it-yourself was the only way you could do your life, because there was no affording doing it by someone else. And I moved out from Lucknow, and I think somewhere it stayed in my head. I quickly went through college, came to Bombay, was in Delhi for many years, and no attachment at all to places. I have never asked what color is it being painted, what's going to be done. I just go there, see it's a nice locality, take it up. Everything became more and more synthetic. It just kept getting more and more synthetic because I could buy my way out of all this do-it-yourself. Always. And I've just not done any of this. And, when this 2 BHK was bought, we suddenly got into this whole thing of saying we're going to furnish it. And now there's this whole idea of saying, how will we furnish it? What will we do? How will we build it? And I keep having these little dreams. And I think almost as a lead up to doing up this new 2 BHK, my wife turned and said, "Pehle apna room to saaf kar lo." And I said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clear all this out, and I'm going to prove to everyone that I can make that space. And I started emptying my room. And as I was emptying my room, I realized that there were 5 drawers. 5 drawers, I kid you not, that are filled with nuts and bolts, wires, screwdrivers, do-it-yourself kits. And I don't know why, but I have preserved them over the years. And it's a suitcase that I've been carrying with all of these wires from all of these houses that have been lying there. And I think in a strange way, they're an umbilical cord that tie me to my own home. None of these wires is going to be of any use. None of these wires is something I can do anything with. And I cannot tell you how difficult it was for me to give away these wires. Because for some strange reason, when you've had parents who've done it all themselves, you keep all these objects almost knowing that someday this nut and this bolt and this wire will have a purpose, and you will find it. Thank you.
This is that time of the video when we ask you to like the story, subscribe to our channel and share the story if you like it. So please do that.
But if they don't like the story, maybe they like the next one. So tell them to watch the next one.
So if you don't like the story, watch the next one. I'm sure you'll like that one.
And cut.